cutting it out. So the curved neckline is stay stitched, and the curved facing pieces are stay stitched. That's all been done so far. The loop is made for the loop that houses the button. Loop is not required on the shirt, but you do have to make a sample of the loop and turn that in separately if you don't want a loop on the shirt. So again, the shirt may have loop closures, as many as you like, or as few as one, if you don't want to do the sample. Or you may do buttonholes on the shirt as well. Not required, but an option. Or you may do no closure on the shirt. So that's also an option. And we did the collar last week, demonstrated fusing, but I will be doing that again because I know at least Tommy needs to fuse, so I'll be demonstrating fusing again. And you have the option of fusing one color section or both, but you do have to fuse one color section. And also you have the option of fusing your interfacing, your front-facing piece if you'd like more stiffness on your garment, but not required. So at this point, if you did have your pocket, the body of the shirt would be done at this point. So you would have your darts if you do have darts, and your pocket would be applied. And the next step will be to attach the collar to the shirt. And so here, this is the collar seam that's going to be attached to the shirt, and the shirt seam is a curve. It's a great big curve. So in order to be able to attach a fairly straight, yes, I know this is not exactly straight, but it's relatively straight. Whenever you want to attach a straight seam to a curved seam, you need to clip the curved seam so that it is straighter. So when you clip, you want to clip, well, aside from keeping the garment from stretching during construction, another function of stay stitching is so that you don't clip past the stay stitching. Because once you've done that, I mean, you can't go back and put the fabric back. So you want to clip to the stay stitching, but not through the stay stitching. So, okay, can you see that? Can you see the clips I'm making? I'm actually erring on the side of caution. I'm going to stitch to within 1/8 inch of my stay stitching, and if that allows me the ability to attach the collar, then that's fine. If it doesn't, I'll clip a little more, or clip more often. So you do want to stay stitch the entire curve of the neck. So it's real important to make sure that your stay stitching is exactly where the seam line is, because if it's deeper and you clip further, the neck of the garment will be too large to accommodate the collar. So all of those things have to be, in other words, there are a lot of different ways you can make a mess. So, and I've made all of them in my life, probably more than once.
So the stay stitching around the neck should be, if you're doing a 5-inch seam, then you'd want it at 5/8.
What I do when I'm stay stitching is I move the needle position one over so it's actually inside the seam allowance.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, when I'm actually attaching the collar or whatever I'm attaching on the stitching line, I don't run the risk of having my stitches not covered completely on the right side of the garment. So, okay, you can see now that I have clipped this entire neck, and can you see now that it's straighter?
How far apart are the clips?
These clips are, no, these are probably 7/8 of an inch apart. The amount of clips you do is a function of how curved is the curve. In other words, the more clips you put in, the straighter you can make the line. You don't want to put in more than you need, but this is something that just comes with experience. But this, I think, is going to do it for me. I don't need to put more clips in. If I do, I'll know right away because I have a hard time pinning the collar to the garment. So you want to pin the collar to the right side of the garment. You want to match the stitching line and the notches. So remember, we have the notches on each end of the collar, and we have the notches on the shirt. That's another reason I like to do a notch, because if I don't do a notch on the garment section, if I just do a clip, then I don't know which clip is a clip to make the collar, the line straighter, or which clip is a matching point. So for me, that's another reason I like to do notches. So I'm going to pin this, and I'm going to match the seam line of the collar with the seam line of the garment. And I'm going to place the pins right on the seam line. And then I'm gonna look on the back to make sure that I actually have them right on the seam line. And now I do. So you're going to do this the entire length of the neck, all the way around. And then I'm gonna pin this on. I'm just gonna pin it on with, oh, never mind. I was gonna show you something, but I don't need to show you yet. I'm actually just gonna pin this on with great big stitches right now, so I can show you the next step as well. And then, for those of you who want to watch me do it, I will go back and actually do this whole thing and sit at the sewing machine and sew it on. But for those of you who are comfortable going on your own, now see, I don't have enough clips. See that? Because it's not lying as flat as I would like it. So I either don't have enough clips, or I need to go back and make a few clips a little bit deeper to get this pinned on. So I think I'm just going to go back and make these clips a little bit deeper. That's what I'm going to do. And maybe put a couple more in where it's extra curvy. When you pin the collar on, make sure that your seam allowance is not twisted. So in other words, my seam allowance here, the French seam, make sure that it's not pressed this way and then it gets twisted this way when you pin the collar on. You have to have everything stitched in the direction it was pressed, because if you don't, you create extra bulk, and it's really not too pleasant to look at. People notice those things when they look at a garment. So I am going to put more clips in. I obviously don't need more clips from the notch out toward the front of the garment. That appears to be fine. I heard that. Do you have audio on here?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, this is much better. Can you see this? It's not pinned, but I can hold it up. Can you see now that this is much better? It's lying flatter. That's because I went back, I put a couple of extra clips in, but I also clipped closer to the stay stitching. So this is going to be the next step. And at this point, I do go over to the machine and I stitch what I've pinned. But I'm just going to pretend that it's stitched and go on and show you the next step. So this is pinned to this is now stitched to the garment on the right side, on the outside of the garment. Okay, and then the next step will be the facing that you prepared with the French seams here. You need to finish the outer edges. So I did a clean finish. I stitched along the 1/4 inch mark, and then I pressed it under. Stitching along the 1/4 inch mark helps it to press under along that line. It just makes it easier to press, and then I just stitched it. Now, one thing to be careful of, you don't ever want seams piling up on top of one another, because if you can avoid it, because that adds extra bulk. So, in other words, the shoulder seams on the garment were pressed to the back, So I want to make sure that the shoulder seams on this were not pressed to the back, and see, they were pressed to the back. But these have already been stitched down because I finished the seam, the outer edge of the seam. So I'm going to go back and repress my shoulder seams to the front on the garment. This is what I'm trying to show you. See, this is now going to be stitched. These seams will be on top of each other. Can you see that the seam here they're both going the same way? You don't want that. Whenever possible, whenever you're sewing, you want the seams to be going the opposite way so that it's flatter. So because I can't go back and change this because it's stitched on the outside, I will go back and press these seams the opposite direction. So that's something that you want to keep in mind whenever you're sewing anything. You want to make sure, you want to try not to have, you need to align the seam lines when you're sewing and attaching pieces and parts, but you don't want the seam allowances themselves to stack one on top of the other. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next step, after I go over there and clean this all up, what do you think the next step is with the neckline of this facing? It's curved.
That's
Clip
clean.
it.
Yeah, I need to clip this also. I need to clip this to make it straighter. And then this is going to be put, basically right sides together on the garment. And I will demonstrate this. We're going to attach this all the way around. We're going to come up the front, go all the way around the neck. Actually, we're going to do more than that. We're also going to stitch it down here at the bottom, a 1/2 inch seam. And I want to show you what this is going to look like. I'm just going to pin baste it right now, along the front and along the neck. And I'll show you what this whole thing looks like. Are there any questions so far? This part's pretty easy, actually. So when this is turned, stitched and turned, you will have the front completely finished. Okay? So let me go get one of those shirts and show you. So this is what it will look like. You'll have the front completely finished, and then this bottom edge closest to the center front will be finished. And then the hem will be done later. The hem on the shirt will be done later. Then after this, you actually have the option, if you don't like a facing flopping around, you can go back and top stitch it down if you want to. This is stitched down. And you could use a decorative thread if you want to, but this is what happens. So everything is finished now. The collar is sandwiched between the garment and the facing. And there are a few more steps that I will do. I'll call you over when I'm there because there are things I have to demonstrate on the machine. But this is pretty much the gist of it. This is how it goes together. There are some finer points, and I will call you over when I'm ready to show those. So that's the game plan. Oh, the other thing I did forget to tell you, you do need to attach, if you're using loops, you want to insert those before you stitch this facing on. Those would be inserted. And they would be inserted, I'm sure you know these would be. You would have the loop, you would have the raw edges facing toward the center of the garment, so that when everything is stitched and turned, it will go this way. So the loop will be aimed over to the other side of the garment. Now here is, this is the way the facing goes together, and this is the way the shirt goes together. Does she still have the other drawing? No, she doesn't. And the loop is folded this way.
What do you mean? What was that you were saying about the loop? That the
Okay, when you're all through with this garment, if you have loops on the front, you want the loop to extend over to the other front so that you can place a button here. So the way you put the loop on, here's the front of the garment, and you would have, usually you'd make all the loops at once, and then you would just cut this into smaller sections. So let me cut this, and I'll show you how you would do this. You also want to test and make sure that the loop is long enough to go around your button, because I've done that before where I thought that it was big enough, and then I had to go buy new buttons because I certainly wasn't going to take all the loops out. So what you do, you would machine baste these to the front of the garment at the intervals that you decide. So I would pin them along like this, however many I wanted. I would pin with the raw edges, even with the raw edge of the garment, and then I would go ahead and machine baste these. And then when the facing does go on, they would be, they would already be attached to the garment. So now I'm going back and stitching this, and then when the garment's finished and this is turned, the loop will be in the seam. That's how that's done. I'm going to do this. I'll be demonstrating all of it. I just wanted to give you a general game plan because I know that a lot of you aren't even ready for these steps yet. You're ready to go back and do some other things. But for those of you who are ready, I'll just, as I said, I'll be working on this and I'll call you over when I'm doing different things. Are there any general questions? No? No general questions?